Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking over. It means a lot that you guys keep clicking. If you guys keep clicking, I'll keep making. And let's talk about RHAP. So RHAP is the brainchild of former Survivor player Rob Cesternino, and it basically acts as a network of podcasts that mainly cover reality shows, but even sports and IRL news. RHAP, which stands for Rob Has a Podcast, is run and overseen by Rob Cesternino, but he has used and implemented a very smart strategy to help grow his channel, which is to sometimes hire, but mostly just ask people to host podcasts on his channel, which at face value doesn't seem that genius. But when you really think about it, he's giving people a platform, which costs a grand total of $0, and in return, they do shows for him, which give him views, which he collects money off of. Some of the most notable examples of this are Taron Armstrong, David Bloomberg, Jessica Lewis, and Hannah Shapiro. And for reference, we're going to be calling these people RITs, or Robs in Training. And this is not to say that he's rarely on his own podcast. He's on many of his own podcasts, but I just wanted to point out the absolute genius of his business model. And I don't want it to come across like I'm being facetious or sarcastic. I genuinely think that this is a very smart way of creating content. RHAP is on many platforms as well, reaching literally any platform that you can listen to podcasts on, as well as YouTube and his own website. He is most definitely top two when it comes to Survivor YouTubers as far as numbers are concerned, and many could argue number one. So this video isn't about his numerical downfall, although it will be extensively pointed out, but more about the quality of his content. But before we look at his downfall, let's look at his rise. So Rob started RHAP shortly after the airing of Heroes vs. Villains, with the first season it covered being Nicaragua in 2010. Now, personally, I was a kid in kindergarten when this happened, so I don't feel qualified to speak on it, but I have an absolutely ancient friend who is still kicking it today at the tender age of 28. And so I'm going to ask him to tell me about what your early RHAP was like for him, being that he had watched RHAP since basically day one.
So if you've seen my channel, you know I have a lot of issues with Rob Has a Podcast. But it doesn't change the fact that when RHAP first started, it was one of the best things to happen to Survivor. I can't remember the exact time I started listening, but I remember I was a full-time listener by the time Survivor South Pacific started. There was no one else offering Survivor coverage the way Rob was doing it. It was the perfect place for hardcore Survivor fans. And he wasn't just the first to do it, he was also delivering quality content. Rob pretty early on brought Fish back on, and they created the best Survivor after show, Survivor Know-It-Alls. Know-It-Alls was awesome. It even made awful seasons like Survivor One World bearable. Rob also had great long-form interviews with past Survivor contestants that gave fans insight they had very little access to before. Rob's first few podcasts with Tyson are some of his best. Rob built a great community for reality TV show fans that there really hadn't been before outside of some forums online like Survivor Sucks. His community grew so big that he started to have live shows. I used to enjoy his content so much that I even attended one of these live shows in New York. And I'll be honest, I had a good time when I was there. What really impressed me about Rob was that he was able to be consistent and professional with his podcast, while at the same time being down to earth and funny. Believe it or not, Rob used to have a great sense of humor. He wasn't as PC as he is nowadays. He was also willing to criticize the cast and the show more harshly in those days. Compare that to now, where he walks on eggshells in order to stay on CBS's good side. Rob also never seemed to care about which way his audience leaned politically. Politics weren't really ever brought up. Now he actively tries to drive away any of his audience that thinks differently from his collective. He went from a down-to-earth, funny guy to a calculating sellout. At this point, Rob will do or say anything to protect his brand. Long are the days of the guy just podcasting live from his apartment.
Make sure to go check out Bitter's channel, top link in the description. But like Bitter said, the podcast was a hit. RHAP started to grow over the 2010s, especially the back half of the decade, with people really liking his almost radio-esque Survivor podcast. And this is when we started to see more RITs appearing on the podcast. And this only added to the network feel, with many different personalities giving you analysis on many different shows, sports, and IRL events. The main one that I want to point out being Taron Armstrong, who simply became the face of RHAP on the Big Brother side, spending hours every day monitoring the live feeds, while Rob chose to stick with his Survivor-focused content, which consisted of exit interviews with voted out players, power ranking podcasts, and past player interviews. But the main and by far the most viewed podcast on his network was and still is the live recaps that he does with Stephen Fishback, called the Survivor Know-It-Alls. You know, he was on top of his game. He was riding high until the very end of these 2010s. And it's very hard to specifically pinpoint, a time in which his fall started. So let's talk about a specific season. So obviously, season 39 will go down in infamy for its sexual assault allegations against and subsequent removal of contestant Dan Spilo. And while I have no big issue with the way that the show, the fans, or Rob dealt with this specific issue, I see it as a turning point. In later seasons, Rob would become much more comfortable with being openly woke and politically excluding. But in this season, it was an instance of Rob being put in a spot because of the scandal where he had to address politics. He was forced to do so. Think of it as an innocent guy being offered drugs from his friend for the first time, and then as he becomes addicted and uses more, he has no problem initiating the drug deal himself. Robin in this situation is the addict, and the sexual assault incident is, the way I see it, is his first time indulging in the drug of wokeness. And as time went on, he became more addicted to the high of excluding and putting down his conservative viewers, and definitely needed counseling both within this analogy and outside of it too. So in a way, I feel for Rob, as the start of his downfall was pushed upon him like a drug, but I also don't feel bad for him because he took it. This way of content has trickled its way down throughout all of his content, with his RITs in many ways being worse than him in the quote-unquote political department. And as the 2010s closed out, we also saw the rise of potential competitors for Rob's throne as the biggest Survivor YouTuber in channels like Peridium and Idled Out. Now, as many problems as I have with these guys as well, I will say they are much less politically excluding and aren't as safe, bland, and careful with their Survivor opinions as Rob is. From videos like Black is Queen, Black Women in Competitive Reality TV, to what was advertised as an episode recap with Davey as a guest, but just ended up being a 45-minute critical race theory class, RHAP was just simply losing its magic. And the channel's growth over the past 2 years has really spoken for itself, as Rob has fully immersed himself into this politically focused way of creating content. As we see in this graph and table, over the past 2 years, Peridium has been able to overtake Rob in both channel views and subscribers. Yes, you heard that right. RHAP, which literally has 10 times the amount of videos and almost 10 more years of existence than Peridium's channel, has already been beaten out by Peridium, who has fractions of the time, post frequency, and budget that Rob does have. In the past 2 years, Rob has gained around 15,000 subs, while Peridium has garnered over 65,000 subs in that same time period. I mean, even the next biggest channel, Idled Out, has gained almost 50,000 in the past 2 years, as compared to Rob's 15,000. The numbers are practically begging Rob at this point to change his performative and woke content, and he just doesn't seem to get that message. It's sad, and it shows me most fans simply not wanting politics in their Survivor, instead looking for bold opinions and new takes, as seen by these numbers. RHAP will only become more obscure as he posts more politically charged and bland content. And for any Rob fanboys who may have a comment typed up along the lines of, well, Rob has more followers than you, loser, just wanted to say, F you. As always, none of this happens without you guys. Without you guys, I'm just a weird guy speaking into a weird microphone. So as always, thank you. And if that's how I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.